Hey guys, what's up? I'm Kit. This is SchizoKitzo. It's time to get crazy. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about what a day is like in a psych ward. I spent a week in a psych ward in May of 2019 for reasons that I'll probably talk about in a later video, but not this video. But I made sure that I wrote everything down in a notebook, because if I didn't have my notebook during this trip, I probably would have lost my mind more than I already did. But this was my notebook that I kept while I was in the psych ward, and it taught me a lot recently about what it was actually like back then. Look at me. Look at this. I just taped in these pages. We had like recreation therapy. I'll explain that in the video. So I kept a journal and I read it recently and it had schedules in it. So I figured, hey, wouldn't my SchizoKitzo family want to hear about what a day was like in a psych ward, especially when I have it hour by hour? So yeah, this is what I'm gonna do, and yeah, let's get started. So the first thing is they claimed that 6:30 was when they woke you up. But this was definitely not the first time that I was woken up. So about 5:30 every morning, and sometimes earlier, they would wake us up to do our vitals. The first morning I was there, they drew my blood at like 5:30 in the morning. So I'm like laying there like passed out, trying to sleep, and they're like sticking my arm, and I'm just like, good Lord, okay. But they only did that once, and they were checking my lithium levels and a few other things to kind of like make sure I wasn't like dying, I guess? I don't know. Psych meds, a lot of them do require blood tests on a regular basis to make sure they're not wrecking your body, because things like lithium and antipsychotic medications do wreck your body over time. So I think that's what they were checking for. But basically they stabbed me at 5:30 in the morning, and then at 6:30 they claimed to wake us up. 7 o'clock was breakfast. Now I'm kind of the type of person at this point in my life, I was very much a sleep-in kind of person. So I didn't really participate in breakfast. I know plenty of people in the hospital who did go to breakfast, and they would have like pork sausage, eggs, bacon, all that normal stuff, just typical breakfast stuff, and that was how the day started. At 7:45, there was daily orientation. This is when they would pass out schedules for the day, and we would read them, they would go over them, and we would figure out what we were doing for the day. At 8:15 was the first outdoor time. Now, I looked forward to outdoor time during my entire stay at this hospital, because outdoor time was basically code for those that needed to smoke had an opportunity to smoke. But for me, it was I got to sit at a table under a little covering, and I got to write in my journal. You know, this journal that I talked to you guys about earlier. But the people would smoke. They weren't allowed to share cigarettes, but I'll get to that in the future. But I would basically sit there, I'd write in my journal outside. When I was in the mental hospital, it was in May, so it was nice and warm outside. So I would sit at my table. Sometimes the sun would shine on me, sometimes it wouldn't. But this early in the morning, I didn't have to worry about the sun. So I just sat and I wrote, and I had a grand old time for the 15 or 20 or 30 minutes that we were out there. On this particular day, at 8:45, we had yoga. Now, when I packed up my stuff for the mental hospital, I didn't pack pants. I packed a lot of long skirts because they were kind of like blankets and I knew I'd be cold. So I basically like kind of skipped out on yoga during this time because I didn't have pants, and no one pressured me to go to yoga. So what I would do is I would sit in the main room. We had a little common area with couches and decaf coffee, not caffeinated coffee, decaf coffee, and I had my little clique, because when you're in a psych ward, you kind of do form little groups. So I had my clique and I would hang out with my clique. At 9 o'clock, we had what was called Med Pass. So Med Pass was basically where everyone lined up for their medications, and we would line up, and when we got to our turn, we would be faced with a plexiglass window and a little area where they could give you their meds. And your meds were always, good Lord, they were always in a blister pack, so it took them forever to give them to us. So if I needed like 3 pills for lithium, they would have to be like, pop the pad, give the pill. Pop the pad, give the pill. Pop the pad, give it. It went on for a while. I had a whole host of medications that I took while I was there, and every single time they had to pop them out of a blister pack, hand them out to me during the little tiny little area in the window with a little tiny cup of water. But anyway, this was morning Med Pass, and it would happen more in the day, but this was the morning time. I also want to make it clear that even when you had Med Pass and they were giving you your meds, you did have the option to refuse them. A lot of people think that when you go into psych wards, you don't have the option to refuse your medication. But for me, the psych ward I was in, I had the opportunity to refuse medication. And I did refuse my lithium because if I did not take lithium with food, I would experience violent nausea. So if I took my lithium, which I did a couple times during this trip, I would end up throwing up later in the day because I didn't have it given to me close enough to food. So yeah, but you're allowed to refuse meds. At 10 o'clock, we had recreation therapy. One of the specific things I can remember about recreation therapy was when we went to that outdoor area I told you earlier, and we sat in the grass and we made necklaces out of like beads and string. And I had a really lot of fun time doing that. So I made little necklaces for my stuffed animals. I made necklaces for me. I basically just like sat down there and I talked to the people that were in my clique again. And we would just have a grand old time, just kind of like being creative. And it was nice to be able to be creative during this time because I'm a very creative soul. So being able to express my creativity, even if it is in a very limited situation, really improved my experience in this psych hospital. At 11 o'clock, we had our first group therapy. Now, I would be lying to you guys if I said that I went to every group therapy. I didn't. They didn't make you go. No one came and got you when group therapy would happen. And the problem with group therapy was they would always talk about stuff that essentially I already knew. So like I've been in therapy for well over a decade and I've learned a lot in therapy. And so a lot of the stuff they went over in group, like good coping mechanisms, figuring out good support systems, all that stuff I had already known and I was already practicing. So a lot of group therapy, and when I went to group therapy, a lot of group therapy was, wow, words. A lot of group therapy I went to was basically just telling me things I already knew. So again, I'd be lying if I said I went to every group therapy. Oh, at 12 o'clock we had lunch. Thank God, food. This was usually the first food I had of the day. So what we would do when it came to meal times is we would line up in this really long line because they wanted us to move as a group. So we would line up in a long line, and then we'd all go down the stairs to get to the cafeteria, and then we'd eat our food, and then we had like maybe, I think we had 30 minutes to eat before we went back up to the main area. But it was really interesting because it was only downstairs that you get caffeinated coffee. You had decaf in the main room that I mentioned on the unit earlier, so the main room where I would hang out with my clique and everything. They had decaf coffee there, but I had 30 minutes to down like 2 cups of caffeinated coffee because they didn't serve it any other time, and I needed my coffee, absolutely needed it. So we would go to lunch, and then we would eat our lunch, and then we drink our coffee, and then we come back upstairs and continue our day. Yeah, and that was part 1 of Kit in a psych ward. What did she go through? And that's just basically what our daily schedule was. So I will see you guys in the next video, and thank you for joining me and making the uncomfortable comfortable.